I'd like to call this meeting of the Board of Education for the School District of Baraboo to order for Monday, February the 25th, 2013, with roll call. Mr. Cummings?
Here.
Mr. McNevin?
Here.
Mr. Mearing?
Here.
Mr. Mortimer?
Here.
Ms. Riley?
Here.
Mr. Pedro?
Here.
And Bodak here. Continue with the pledge. The flag is on the screen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes of the February 11th meeting.
I so move to approve them.
Second.
I have one request, and that is in the section where we approved section 8, new business, and we approved the bid of the bleachers. Could we, from Goodson Company, could we also include the amount on that bid, which I think is $130? Okay, just so that it's in the minutes, so that we attach to that particular proposal, so over time, we don't lose track, or, because it was an attachment to the agenda when it came out before that meeting, and I did check that. And then you sent through, Martha, you did send through the apples to apples comparison. So I just would like to have that amount.
It's 138.
Could we do that?
Is that okay with you, Mr. Marion?
Yes, that's fine. I will accept that as a friendly amendment.
Thank you.
Mr. McNevin, did you second, or was it Mr. Pedro?
I did, that's fine.
But it's okay with me too.
Is it? Appreciate you.
Big time.
Having a motion and a second, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Minutes carried. Brings us to correspondence. I have none. Any other board members with correspondence? Administrative correspondence?
I have several pieces of communication tonight. The first is from a consulting firm who they facilitate supervision training for administrative staff on standards-driven practices for developing professional expertise. They've been contracted by the Milwaukee Public School System, and they invite selected teachers outside of the Milwaukee schools on a very limited basis to participate. And so this letter is addressed to Lori Miller, and they are inviting Teresa Lean because of her work across the state in this area. They also recognize that the Baraboo School District has built a highly respected model here in Wisconsin, and they're confident that Teresa will continue to learn from the additional training, which will be at no cost to our district. So we're happy to have her participate in that. We've also received communication from the Wisconsin School Counselor Association that East Elementary, Gordon Wilson, Al Behrman, and Jack Young have each created an exemplary document titled the Support Personnel Accountability Report Card for Wisconsin. In fact, the winners were just recently recognized at a conference in Madison this past Thursday, last Thursday. And the board will be hearing more about this, but basically, They share these with state legislators, the award-winning documents, and the strong examples of how school counselors make a difference for the students across the state. And they're pleased to recognize the excellent work done by the school counselors and the entire team at each of these schools. So we will be having more information. Congratulations to the schools and the winners. And we will recognize those staff members who were involved in that process. And my last piece of communication is the joint press release that went out today to the local newspaper and other stakeholders from the city of Baraboo and the school district. And that is informing that due to heightened security and safety of our students and staff, we are relocating election polling places out of our schools, and they've designated one site, and that will be effective April 2nd. So we're working together on a number of communication pieces, hoping the newspaper, I think I saw Tim here tonight, will also publicize that for us, and we'll have to work on some signage. But I was very pleased with the collaborative process, working with the local law enforcement in the city on that process.
Is that it? Any other administrative correspondence? Hearing none brings us to the portion of the agenda entitled Public Viewpoints. Is there anyone here for public viewpoints tonight? Any public viewpoints? Any public viewpoints? Hearing and seeing none, I'd like to move on to the staff and student recognition portion of our agenda. And we have Mr. Kuyak with us, and for that I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ritzenthaler for intro.
Well, you probably see a familiar face here tonight. Paul's been with the district for a number of years, and he continues to support both the district and the student in a number of ways. He plays, we just talked about safety, he plays a key role on the safety committee at Jack Young Middle School. If any of you haven't attended the Veterans Day Assembly that they hold on an annual basis at the middle school, I highly encourage you to attend that. It's very moving. They have a number of local community members participating in that venture. And also through his TA group of students, he's organized service learning opportunities for his students. And it's very timely that we have a social studies teacher here tonight, a civics teacher, when we have some of our legislators here tonight. And he's here to talk about the student that we're recognizing, also Colin. So Colin.
My name is Colin Updegraw, and I'm a 7th grader at the middle school, and this is my social studies teacher, Mr. Kuyak. And thank you for having us.
Colin is also the child of Carla and Tom Updegraw, both former students of this school district, and we're here to talk a little bit about Colin, how he won the geography bee for the middle school this year. And you know, after I reflected back, after Colin was the winner of the geography bee, things kind of came into place as how he was eventually our champion. And each day in civics class, we start out with current events. And the kids really share out quite well with it. You'd be amazed at how much they love to talk about current events. And it'll be on a local level, it'll be on a state level, perhaps it'll be on the national level. In fact, Sean, I'm very, very fortunate to have Claire first hour, because if I miss Sports Center in the morning, she'll fill me in.
It's helpful when I'm running late too.
She kept us on top of Notre Dame football this year.
That's right.
With usually a daily report. But to her credit, she also gave us the report after the national championship game too, which she modeled loyalty for her classmates very well. Absolutely, she really did. But when this young man speaks up about current events, it'll be something like, well, today or yesterday in North Korea, they shot off yet another nuclear missile, much to the chagrin of the United Nations. And kids are like, what? What's going on, Or he'll be talking about Secretary of State Hillary Clinton speaking before a panel at the Capitol in regard to the Benghazi situation. He raises the bar to a very, very high level with his knowledge of what's going on in world affairs. So every January, the first week of January, we have a school-wide geography bee. Every student partakes in it. So we're looking at just under 700 kids taking part in this. And they answer a battery of questions, and out of that group then, it's pared down to the top 10. And folks, I'm here to tell you, there were some tough questions this year. And every one of those students that participated really did a marvelous job. But Colin emerged as our champion. And in fact, just to stress the point of how difficult this was, I have the question here that I'd like to read that Colin actually won the championship on. Okay? Is that all right with you? What was it? Should we try that?
Yeah.
Colin said before I came in, why don't we pick somebody here to see if they can get that question? Who would you like to try, Colin? In the purple here?
Yeah.
Mrs. Mueller, you might want to
I'll be your
listen very
friend.
carefully. You're the alternate.
Phone a
If you-
friend. Phone a friend.
Say go, John, go.
Yeah, phone a friend, here we go. Okay, so on your 40th birthday,
Oh,
nonetheless, Mr. Blazinski, here we go. The Yanghan were a nomadic tribe that were indigenous to I even have a hard time pronouncing some of these words. I'll start over. The Yanghan were a nomadic tribe indigenous to Tierra del Fuego, an island group that is divided between Argentina and what other country? The Yanghan were a nomadic tribe indigenous to Tierra del Fuego, an island group that is divided between Argentina and what other country?
I would just like to point out that as we, a board, have approved our students having
Yeah, it's.
their digital personal computer to help them with these quizzes. Please note Ms. Mueller's fingers.
Mr.
I don't know.
Blazinski?
You have a guess? Think Argentina.
You have to extend your friendship over this direction.
Oh, yeah. Call Mr. Hummel. He knows that area well.
Yes, Chile.
Chile.
Congratulations, Mr. Blazinski.
I like to say Mr. Ruler also knew the right answer.
All right. I was afraid you were going to say Poland, but nonetheless,
Another island group.
Colin has since taken the regional questions of the Geography B. We don't have those results yet, but we will in early March. And we're very hopeful that he'll be advancing on to the state championship. So I present to you once again Colin Updegraw, our champion.
The Baraboo School District, we'd like to offer this medallion to you, Honors for Excellence for your accomplishment, and we look forward to hearing about many more successes in the years to come, so congratulations.
Wait, Crystal, wait. We got a photographer.
You can get that one to the Baraboo.
And last but not least, Mr. Kuyak, thank you for making learning exciting and relevant for kids and making all of the community connections that you do between the school and the Baraboo School District.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Mr. and Mrs. Updegraw, our parents are here. The parents are here, and you are alumna of Baraboo High School, of the Baraboo School District. One of the challenges that this board has faced is some concern that the golden days of the Baraboo School District, which I'm sure included your cohort, has passed. But I would like to point out that today your son has indicated, and at the last board meeting, we had an opportunity to be presented with another student from the high school who had placed 6th in the nation in a math competition. So we must be doing something right, Baraboo School District. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming today.
Brings us to the portion of the agenda entitled Reports, and first up, we have Director of Business Services, Ms. Baldwin, to talk about the 2013-14 revenue projections.
Good evening. All of the board members should have a piece of paper that looks like this and also looks like that. The Finance Committee received it earlier tonight and I handed it out to the rest of the board. The first part of developing a budget for the next year is determining revenue projections so that we can then estimate our expenditures for the year. And with the governor's proposed budget that was announced last Wednesday, we did start working on some projections based on our preliminary interpretation of what he said, but we know that things will change over the next few months. So you can see either on the piece of paper or up here, I put together the first 4 years of actual data starting in 2008 to 2009 on the revenue side of the budget. And then the 2012-13 column is our current adopted budget. And then I extended it out to 2013-14 for projections. Based on what Governor Walker said on Wednesday, there is a 1%, he proposed a 1% increase to equalization aid, but no increase to the revenue limit. So in effect, it's a net zero increase from year to year. So for the time being, I've kept our local and state numbers exactly the same based on his initial proposal. If you look at the interdistrict line, that is our open enrollment revenue. And when I looked at the numbers that Danny will actually be sharing with you pretty soon after I get done talking here, when we look from 2011-12 to 2012-13, we're actually up 20 students coming into the district. So I believe our revenue projection for this current year is low. So I've included those additional 20 students plus projected another 10 students into 13-14. So that's why you see such a large variance from the $414,000 to the $593,000. Again, we'll keep monitoring that throughout this year and make changes if we need to as we get closer to adopting the budget. And then finally, the federal line. As many of you have heard in the news about the sequestration, right now this budget projection assumes that that occurs, and from some of the research that we've done, I've put into place a 5.1% reduction to federal revenues, assuming that takes place. I believe we find out on Friday what will eventually happen. So I know numbers have been as high as a 15% reduction. So again, this estimate may change over the next few months, but for the time being, this is what we're moving ahead with for now. I also put the fund balance towards the bottom of the page just to show you where we've been over the last few years. The $5.19 million in 2012-13, which is the fund balance we started out with at the beginning of this year, is based on our audited financials, so that is an absolute number. And then, as you may recall, the board has approved the track renovation and the middle school phase 1 of the wall to come out of fund balance, which is approximately $1 million. So that's why I've shown $1 million decrease in the fund balance. Again, we'll continue monitoring that through the Finance Committee, through our budget to actual reports that we will be reviewing, and we'll keep updating this as necessary. Are there any questions from the board?
If the fund balance drops to that level, is that going to influence our bond rating for future borrowing?
I think we're still at a safe level compared to the policy that the board has approved. The board's policy is 15%. So I think we'll be okay, but we definitely want to monitor that because you're right, it could potentially affect the bond rating.
Okay. And the federal, obviously, I never realized that far back, but obviously, even without the sequestration, we're having issues with our federal government really kicking in on some of the mandates that they require us to do. Not to say they're bad mandates, but with like special education and so forth.
And the one blip you'll see in there in 2011-12, that is from the Ed Jobs funding that we received as a district. So we had a little spike in federal
Ed Jobs?
revenue.
What? Oh, that was
Education jobs.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that. Okay. I think we may have some further later on when we get into the legislation.
Okay.
But there is some further action, but I'd like to hear some more from our
Sure.
legislators too.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next up on the agenda is entitled Legislative Update. And we are fortunate to have with us tonight Senator John Erpenbach and Representative Fred Clark. So for that, I'm going to turn the intro over to the chair of the Policy and Legislation
And-
Committee.
And
Mr.
John or
Marion?
James, could we have those, unless you want to join them, or? John seems to be good at being on the spot, so we'll let you sit there.
Oh, you can leave those, that's fine.
Check
out Facebook.
Okay, rather than me making the introductions, why don't we make the introductions? Obviously, we have a new representative, and we can start with you, John.
Yep, John Erpenbach, born and raised in Middleton, and because of the wonderful world of redistricting, my district, actually, it's unique. My Senate district over the past 10 years grew by the most amount of people out of every Senate district. But about 40 to 45% of my new Senate district is new. You would think the district would actually get smaller in size. It got bigger. So the district essentially runs from New Glarus, Monticello, over to the west a little ways, over by Spring Green, but not Spring Green, up through Barneveld and Mount Horeb and Verona, Cross Plains, Sauk, Baraboo, up to the Dells, but not the Dells, over to Portage, and Portage is in it, and then ends up over by Windsor. So it's really unique, actually really beautiful district. Represents a lot of what Wisconsin is. I represent some fairly large cities, some rural area, and some villages as well. And so what I've been doing is getting to know the newer parts of the district over the past couple of months, and will continue to do so. And you won't know this because you've never been in, haven't lived in the 27th Senate District, but my door is always open. I'm usually in the district more than I'm in the office, but I'm in the office just about every day, and then just head out to the districts for meetings. So anytime anybody wants to get together and talk about what's going on at the Capitol, I'd be more than happy to do it.
Okay, good. And Fred, you're kind of an old hat to us, but you have some new areas that you're covering too, correct? Even though we're still part of your area.
That's right. I'm glad about it anyway, but yeah, the new 81st Assembly District, which is part of the 27th Senate District, includes now most of eastern Sauk County, actually has about half of the county, including Baraboo, as well as Portage. And I've recently relocated to Sauk City myself, so unfortunately I don't get to reside in the Baraboo School District any longer.
Mhm.
But you still also, with some of the towns you have to the west of here, Representative Brooks, I think, still has part of the Baraboo School District.
Okay, all right. I wasn't sure that Ed Brooks still did, but I'll look into that. Okay, well, before we get into questions from the board, why don't we just get a little feedback from your end, and then we'll each ask a question as far as what our concerns as far as the legislative issues that we're seeing right now. So we can start with you, John, and then
Okay.
we'll have Fred give a little.
Just basically, you just heard the governor essentially is looking at a zero-sum game for public education right now, and expanding the voucher program by about 29 or 30%. The governor has made it very clear that vouchers are important to him. I don't think vouchers are important to the rest of the state. I think the state as a whole, we take a lot of pride in our K-12 education system, and our technical school system, and our UW system. We always have. We know that if our kid graduates from a Wisconsin school and they're applying to a college that they want to get into, graduating from a Wisconsin high school is a pretty big deal to the rest of the nation. I'm not certain Governor Walker is quite aware of that. To me, it's a situation where school boards, teachers, administrators, but really teachers are asked to do more now than ever before with less. Teachers have to take every kid who walks through the doors. You have to. The voucher programs, they don't have to. They can cherry pick. They can take whoever it is they want to take. They can say no to somebody else. We don't know if teachers are certified. We don't know what their training is. We don't know what test results are. We don't know any of that. We're just supposed to take their word for it, yet it's our money that's walking out the door. Baraboo helps finance the voucher program, have been since essentially its creation. So I have a real problem with what the governor wants to do personally with public education. If anything, we certainly have some issues that we need to deal with as a state. More so in particular parts of our state, communities have some issues that they need to deal with. We need to give them the resources, whatever it takes for them to deal with it. We need to let school boards do the job they're elected to do. We really need to step out of the way. At the very least, I would love to see the caps be a lot more flexible if we can't get rid of them altogether. So that's kind of what we're dealing with here. And the political reality is really simple. Most governors get what they want. This governor will get what he wants in the end. He has a working majority in both houses. So if he wants to expand the voucher program by 30%, if he really wants to do that, that's what he'll get. If he wants to make it a situation where teachers can be hired based on experience in the private sector as opposed to actually being a teacher, he'll get that too. In the end, the governor will get what he wants. Our job is to make sure that we do the best job we possibly can, speaking up for the public schools in our district, making sure that we put a face on what cuts school districts will be looking at. And if at all possible, try and avoid a situation where you're going to have parents against parents based on cuts you're going to have to make. It just puts you in an awful situation. And there isn't anything you can do about it. And our job is to try and figure out a way for you to be able to do something about it. So aside from that, things are fine. I'm looking forward to the budget session. It was introduced this past week, and it'll make its way through the Joint Committee on Finance and through the legislature, and by the end of June, you should know what you're dealing with.
Sure, sounds good. Fred?
Yeah, well, I'll just, there's not too much I can say to add to that, but I do think when the budget came out just in the last couple of weeks, a lot of what's in the budget is really unknown to people, even people who are very close to issues like education, until it does come out. And I think it's fair to say it was a whole lot worse than a lot of people had hoped for. I think people knew that our governor was very philosophically aligned with the private school movement, and that we were going to see movement toward more privatization in this budget. But I think proposing as far-reaching a set of recommendations as he did surprised some people who really thought that he'd actually be listening more to public education advocates, which is, up until recently, has been almost everybody in this state. So in addition to flatlining revenue for public schools, and as John pointed out, the pretty dramatic increase in voucher schools, and I think about $73 million new dollars in voucher school spending. That's going to increase it in 9 new cities. He's also included in the budget what was a failed bill last session, the special needs scholarship that's going to, I consider it, parasitize every public school district for which an independent special needs school wants to set up shop and pull those students out of there, and the public schools will be paying for that. And it also includes the independent charter school authorizing board that will go beyond what may happen with voucher schools by giving this board the authority to set up independent charter schools anywhere in the state. So and the fine point and the fine print on a lot of those proposals is still being read through by our legislative fiscal bureau and everybody else to figure out, is it better or worse than some of the bills that were in last session? But it looks pretty substantially similar right now. So, as many of you know, John Forrester, who's with the school district administrators, who's usually pretty reserved in his comments. I think one of the quotes that I appreciated from him was that, this one's for all the marbles. I mean, this is about the future of public education. And I think where both of us stand on that issue, but even moderate Republicans who are going to have some tough choices, will have some tough choices about what to do with this budget. And Luther Olson and I, as you know, used to represent the Baraboo School District, and I think in his heart he's a public school supporter, and there's a lot of members in his caucus who are really disappointed, or worse than that there's not an increase for public schools in there, that there's no revenue limit increase at all after what has happened in the last session and the cuts that schools have had to absorb. So beyond that, the one bright note I did want to offer is that I met last week with Representative Gary Buys, who's the chair of the Criminal Justice Committee in the Assembly, and he has offered to join me in picking up the gun-free school zone legislation for kindergartens that we had introduced last session. And we'll be working with his office to get that reintroduced, and I hope have a better prospect of getting that bill passed. And obviously Baraboo is one of many communities for which that current law just creates a loophole that nobody intended.
Okay, great. All right, why don't we have a few questions from the board? Gary, do you have any?
I don't have any at this time, but maybe.
Okay, Sean?
I'm just listening.
Okay.
Ed? No?
Well, I'll ask about the new, about the election for at DPI and what difference we might see, or what the status of those two candidates might mean in the future. Is there any hope for fair funding? It's
I think if we're gonna get to fair funding, we're gonna have to change the way we pay for schools. That's just my opinion. We need to take them off the property tax, and we need to, in my opinion, not speaking for Fred on this one, but in my opinion, we need to close the exemptions on the sales tax and exempt just the necessities of life and agriculture, and you put a 5% sales tax and everything else, and you pay for schools that way, and you take schools completely off the property tax. Until we get to something like that big idea kind of a thing, we're gonna continue to do this Rube Goldberg kind of spackle and patch and all sorts of things, and try and figure out a way to keep public schools open. The governor, in my opinion, not speaking for Fred, but in my opinion, not speaking for any other Democrats, wants to privatize K-12 education. That's what he wants to do. So the first step was to deal with collective bargaining and the teachers union. The second step is to financially starve school districts. Step 2A or 2B is to expand the voucher program, and who do not play by the same rules, same laws that the public schools have to. As a result of that, you'll hold up the kids over here in the voucher program saying, look how great they're doing, and look how bad public schools are doing. That's what's set up here. That's, if we're looking 5, 6, 8 years down the road, that's what we're looking at. The superintendent's race, because the legislature and governors over the course of time have taken away the authority from the superintendent's office. Governor Thompson cut funding for a while. I think Governor Thompson actually wanted to eliminate the office, if I remember right. What the superintendent's main job right now is to stand up for public education, period, nothing else. And I have my opinions as to who would do a better job in that situation. But in the long run, the superintendent, I wish the superintendent had more impact and more oversight and more authority when it comes to public education. I wish the superintendent's budget wasn't continually slashed. DPI, and I'm saying this, my dad worked at DPI for like a million years. He did. He was a public school teacher in Middleton, then a guidance counselor, then a vice principal, and then went to DPI. And over the course of time, I saw what he did, and I saw how many hours he put in, and I saw budgets slashed. So, in my personal opinion, I think Tony does a great job standing up for public schools.
Yeah, I'll just echo that. I didn't disagree with a single thing you said.
But I'm not speaking for Fred.
No, I think Secretary Evers has done a really credible job heading up that agency. And for the second time in a row, he's made a budget request for fair funding for our schools. It's not pie in the sky. Does it require a significant investment? Yeah, but it pales in comparison in some ways to some of the other ways our governor and legislator had decided to spend money in the last few years. And in the section in the governor's budget on public instruction, on the long list of items that are not approved, which includes increases in the SAGE program and special needs and sparsity aid and school breakfast and bilingual aid and all the things that you all live and breathe with, that are not approved for increases. Fair funding is not approved either. And I can tell you that I think 18 of my colleagues and I signed a letter to the governor back in November asking him to consider at least some of the provisions in the fair funding recommendation, but it's been almost completely ignored. I do think, though, that Secretary Evers is a great superintendent. I'm supporting him. It's one of those elections, though, that it might not have a lot of traction right now, but if some outside group like the Walton family or the DeVos family, who is really pushing this private school agenda nationally, decides to come in and play heavily in that election, they could do it, and it could be one of those things that we'll never know the outcome until it's over. But hope that answers your question.
Really depressing.
There are ways to deal with this. I mean, there really are. It's going to have to, and this is be odd coming from me, it's going to have to take an adult conversation with people who don't recognize the fact that we're Democrats or we're Republicans. And it starts with paying for schools differently. And then we also at the same time have to come up with a very fair funding formula to make sure that constitutionally we are upholding our obligation to give every kid equal opportunities from one end of the state to the other. Right now, we don't have that. We're not even close. You've got Wisconsin Heights and Middleton Cross Plains right next to each other, and there's this giant glass wall where the Middleton people can't see the Heights kids, and the Heights kids can't see the Middleton. It's awful. And the opportunities my kids have at Middleton are phenomenal. Heights does the best job they possibly can do under really, really trying circumstances. And so the idea is we have to sort of take down those walls and start sharing services and staff where we can. In Waunakee, you have foreign language in elementary school. That's awesome. I don't know why we're not doing distance learning all the way over to Wisconsin Heights to give those kids the same opportunity with teachers in both classrooms. I mean, there's ways to do this. But we have been paying for schools this way forever. And our school calendar has been the way it has been forever. And times have changed. You have senior citizens on fixed income who want to have the best schools for the grandkids, but they built our schools. They can't afford referendums anymore because they're on fixed incomes and their property taxes go up. So to me, it comes with getting schools completely off of property taxes first, finding a different way that's fair to pay for them, and then you deal with the funding formula.
Thank you.
Peter?
Time's up. Okay, no, I'm just kidding.
Time was up a long time.
Yeah.
It seems like, into the biennium. We have a situation, as both of you have laid out, that is more than depressing. And it requires of all of us to speak truth to power, as I think most of this community and other communities did when Governor Walker released his first budget and the budget repair bill. And it seems to me that we have to stimulate that awareness, as you've laid out, of what reality is versus kind of the smoke and mirrors, and the difference between words and the actual consequences of those words, so that people can understand what is happening in this state, specifically to the vast amount of children who may not come from very wealthy backgrounds and who depend upon public school to be able, as you have said, who public schools are now required to meet all of the issues that society has chosen no longer to deal with. To feed our children, to clothe our children, to educate our children, at the same time at which our teachers are demonized. I think we have a great opportunity to take on those issues.
To me, the one bright spot, it's really, despite what's been going on the past couple of years, and even before that, with the QEO and with cost controls and everything that's been happening to public education, the school boards, but especially administrators, staff, and most importantly, teachers, continue, despite all of this stuff, to do a phenomenal job in producing quality students who consistently test well, certainly within the top 3 in the country. And we have a really wonderful public education system in this state. And it's getting to the point where you are either for public education or you are for private education. Those are the lines that are being drawn right now. And so the teachers and the staff and the administrators continue to battle through all this stuff. You know, you wouldn't know it if you go into a classroom and watch a teacher teach. They're under a tremendous amount of stress just because of budget. You wouldn't know it going into well, there's one principal I remember, but you wouldn't know it going in most of principals' offices. You wouldn't know how much stress they're under. And trying to deal with budgets and trying to deal with everything. And then you talk to school board members, and it's like, the amount of stress there is unbelievable. Because you're dealing with the mentality that everybody's gone to school, so everybody knows how to run a school. Everybody knows what's going on. And some of these people who have very strong opinions haven't been in a school for quite a while. They don't know what's going on. They don't know the amount of special needs kids that school districts are dealing with now. They don't know the amount of poverty perhaps within their own community that school districts are having to deal with. So I still think despite all this stuff, you know, schools are continue to do a phenomenal job. They just do.
One of the challenges we face, thank you very much for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. One of the challenges we face is we're about to talk in more detail than I'll ever be able to retain. It's the open enrollment, the ease of open enrollment. And that's a wonderful opportunity for a lot of students. But I've only been on the board like 4 or 5 years, but it feels like we're fighting a losing battle in that a slick marketing campaign tied to a school district somewhere in the state will siphon off millions of dollars, and that school will reap a small stipend for being a sponsoring district. It almost feels like we need to be better marketers of our district. And that's great, I'm all for that. I'll be happy to sell the song of the Greybull School District to anybody that will listen, especially in the area, to talk about, you know, the benefits of bringing your student here. The problem is, when you start that as a process, it becomes a battle of haves and have-nots. And it seems to me like if that's the case, then we've lost. And maybe there will be winners, and maybe those that recognize the game earlier than others will have a better shot, but they'll definitely be losers. So I guess that's just the general frustration I feel sitting on the board as a local board member. My second question, John, or my first question, John, is to you. With you had mentioned a changing of a funding formula and changing that source of revenue and getting off the property tax. And I had always learned that a sales tax was kind of a regressive approach, because it hits everybody. You know, a lot of people say, great, finally a sales tax, everybody pays. But when you look at the socioeconomics, it really hits a low-income earner harder than it does somebody else. How do you address that?
I actually used to agree with you. And if we don't make a couple of changes in what we tax right now, you'll be absolutely right. Right now, we pay a sales tax on clothing, and under what I want to do, you wouldn't. All clothing would be tax exempt. Right now, under our current sales tax, if you go out for dinner, you pay a sales tax. If you cook it at home, you don't. Under what I want to do, all food, whether you go out to dinner or not, would be exempt from the sales tax. Anything dealing with your house, home, building a home, materials, stuff like that would be exempt. Anything dealing with your healthcare would be exempt, and then anything dealing with agriculture would be exempt because it's the #1 industry in the state. Everything else you would pay a sales tax on. That would be all legal services, lawyers, accounting, advertising. I'm getting a haircut tomorrow because I'm looking like a Brady kid. So I would pay. Marsha.
I thought we were supposed to shout one out.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So I would pay, under what I want to do, I would pay 5% sales tax on that. As long as you are exempting the necessities, it's not nearly as regressive as the property tax has become.
And when you eliminate or when you start to include those that have not been included before, does that offset those? I mean, have you run the numbers?
Yeah, actually, there's
a model that worked?
we more than double what we collect in the sales tax right now. If we were to do something like this.
Well, I suppose lawyer fees alone. I'm putting this out there because this is one idea. And if it's not going to be something like this, then what else should it be? We don't need to raise the sales tax. We don't. We can keep it where it is. We can just close the exemptions.
And if we did that, we'd still have one of the lowest sales tax rates around. Our property taxes would go down. Now, the flip side of the property taxes is the legislature would be, that's where we would get our money. That's where the governor would get his or her money to spend. On the property tax right now, it's counties, local municipalities, schools, technical schools, and there's also a state property tax. It's small, but it's on there. So in order for the legislature to spend any money, we would be responsible for the property taxes, not school districts anymore. And we would also have to, and this is, it's going to sound so bad because it's never happened before, we would have to have a fund because the economy goes like this. And when you don't want school funding to be good one year and then not good the next year. So the idea is that, and there would be money left over to start setting up a fund and have a statutory fund that would have to be, a statutory limit that would have to be funded in case the economy does go bad. So we don't need to cut back from schools, or we don't need to go out and raise taxes, that we just draw down from that statutory fund. Now, people will say the legislature wouldn't be able to, governors borrow from the fund and the legislature would take from the fund, and I would agree with you too. Unless we figure out a way to make it so legally difficult for a legislature to use that money or a governor to use that money for anything other than paying for public education. And there's also enough money to take technical schools off the property tax too, if we did that. So in other words, it generates a lot of money. Now, are those in the legal community happy about this idea? No. They're not, but as long as every lawyer has to do it, then they think it's fair. Will I have to pay a few more cents for a couch if they have to pay a sales tax on advertising? Maybe I do, but I have a choice on that. I don't have a choice on clothing right now. I have to pay sales tax on clothing. I need clothes. If I'm not wearing clothes, I'll be arrested. It's ugly. You don't want to see that. So, but it's a necessity of life. We have to have clothes. So why are we paying a sales tax on it? So there's a way. Again, there's a way to do this as long as you get the proper exemptions in place. That it's not regressive and it doesn't hit those who tend to be poor more than those who aren't.
I appreciate your point too about open enrollment. And I know when that law was changed last year, we heard a lot of input from administrators about, just throwing the door almost wide open effectively to open enrollment almost any time or in such a broad window that we're encouraging kids and families to school shop and almost create a revolving door where you can go to one school and if that doesn't work out in 6 months, you can jump over to another one. And
We're seeing activity on a weekly basis, and it's very reactionary.
Yeah.
And it's not good for kids.
Sure. So a kid has a bad experience and things blow up a little bit, and instead of working to resolve it and sort of figure it out and stick with it, you just go to another school. Yeah, that's
Or those unintended consequences, we call it.
Yeah. Monroe used to be in the 27th Senate District, and they have a virtual school, and they do a good job at it. I have seen advertisements for virtual schools, and you're right. I mean, it's a matter of marketing. And we have to remember, and I know Fred knows this, and I remember it, but I need to remind some of my colleagues, outside of the churches and the town hall, schools are the identity of any community that you go to in this state. It's schools. I'm a Cardinal. I went to Middleton High School. People, the rallying point around communities are schools. And if they disappear, communities will start to fade away too. So if schools are strong, communities are strong. And if we keep going down the road we're going down now, I think we're just looking at a totally different ballgame in a couple of years. And some communities, especially some smaller communities, will lose a little bit of their identity if they have to shut down their schools, which they may have to.
The one question I have on that is that yes, there are good virtual schools out there, but there are others out there where there are issues. And a school body can say, I'm going to have a virtual school, yet when it comes to accounting for their students, they don't call them their students. That's a separate school. Now, they may siphon money off of them, but they're not taking the accountability. We have online students here. They're our students, and we consider them our students. They're considered part of ours, but there's not that requirement that says if you're taking that money, they're yours, and they're part of your overall student count. So as we start going down these roads of accountability, that needs to be taken into account.
Well, I think if there's going to be a move to, and I think we dealt with it last session, caps on virtual schools. I think it was last session. If there's going to be a move to really blow the caps on virtual schools,
Sure.
then I think you'll see the student count look different. I think you'll see all sorts of things that would look different than what you're dealing with right now when it comes to that situation.
But it's an accountability issue. If we're required to have the accountability, then we need to make sure things are in place for other schools.
Right.
Because it's not that we want it to work for any kid, but sometimes it isn't working, and we are sometimes getting these students back a year later, and they're not any further along. Now we have to pick up the pieces from what's happened over the year or two when they've been gone. So. Hey, Kevin?
I'd like to thank both of you for coming. I'm going to sit here and not be quite the pessimist as far as the governor's budget. John, your colleague in the 14th, Mr. Olson, and colleague in the 17th, Dale Schultz, have both publicly come out against the expansion of the vouchers. And I think,
Not against. They don't.
That's what I read.
They don't want to see it as big.
Well, I think there's some room for bipartisanship when it comes to the vouchers. Senator Schultz has in the past bucked heads with the governor, so I don't think that would be a first for him. I'm not sure, Fred, what Mr. Brooks's stance is on it, but I think there is some opportunity there. Senator Schultz even went so far as to say that he was looking for a $200 per pupil increase in the revenue cap. So I think there is some room to work there. And I disagree that the governor's going to get everything that he wants. I hope I'm proven right and you're proven
Right.
wrong, and not from the standpoint I want to be right. I think that there is an opportunity for, in particular in the Senate, for there to be some discussions. And I know that Senator Olson was part of a committee a few years back that looked at changes in funding, and the end result was it went nowhere. So I wish you the best in whatever you can do to move that process forward, because I think that is something that does have to happen.
You know, Kevin, well, I was just going to, I agree with your assessment that we need to still be optimistic about this and work constructively to affect some changes while the budget window is open. And, you know, I think you're right. Senator Olson understands school finance as well as anybody. And I think if Senator Olson and Senator Ellis and Senator Erpenbach were working together to actually craft a proposal for schools, it would look a whole lot different than what we have in front of us right now. But I think that part of what's going to be critical here is for public schools to tell their story about how this budget would affect you, about the things that won't happen here if this is implemented as it's currently crafted, about the opportunities that you have. You know, I think personalizing the numbers is really what has to happen, and anything that we can do to be helpful getting that story out, you could, I think, count on
This
us
is
to
certainly
be
a
there.
start tonight, just to be here.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's just to tie in with what Fred says, I think we have a job to do, is to do what you're saying, is to say, this is what's affecting it. Martha's given us a little bit of what's here. These are numbers, but these numbers actually will have impacts. And I think it really behooves us to, not just for you, but even for all the legislatures and even to our own representatives in the Wisconsin School Board, to give them the tools to say, this is Baraboo's story. This is what we're doing. Lori's going to give us a little story in just a little bit about some of the positive things we're doing. So we're not out there saying, begging and crying for money. We're asking for resources to invest in our students and the future of not only our students, but of the state. And I think we can work on that. I think I can work with Dr. Ritzenthaler and the rest of the board to craft something like that, so you have tools to say, look, this is the story that's happening here. And our story can be duplicated in many other places, I'm sure.
And real quick, on the magic number in the state senate is 17. You need 17 votes. There's what we would need to do in order to either stem, change, whatever we possibly can to the choice program. We need to have 3 Republican senators.
I can
vote.
work on two, I can't, I don't know.
Right,
about-
no. And there are three right now that are out there. There's Senator Mike Ellis out of Neenah, there's Luther Olson, and there's Dale Schultz. When we were dealing with the budget repair bill, at the beginning of all of this stuff, there were 3 or 4 senators on the other side of the aisle who were willing to sit down and try and work something out. In the end, it never happened. And the reason why I say the governor gets what the governor wants is that's just usually the case. Democrats will be there with the Senate Republicans every step of the way, offering up alternatives, every step of the way. We will do whatever we possibly can to not only stand up what we believe in, but take something that we think isn't a very good idea and try and make it better. I would bet some money right now that there won't be one Democratic amendment adopted to the budget. I'm just saying that just based on experience in the past. But it doesn't mean that we don't try, and it doesn't mean that they don't sit down with us and try and work something out, because we always have. Sometimes we're successful and sometimes we're not. And the things we're not usually successful on are usually the very controversial things, like the choice program. But we'll try, obviously.
Crystal?
Well, I was just going to jump in and make a statement that Doug made. It was a good segue that you provided, Fred, about our personal story, and it's something that we've been kind of talking about the last couple of days, and not just talking in generalities, but being more specific to our school district and our community. So you can look for communication coming your way, and we'll make sure we target some others as well.
Well, that's great, and I hope that some of you will be able to make it to Madison as well as events like this. And, you know, I think there's a couple of real specific asks that reasonable legislators of either party ought to be thinking about right now. You know, one's a revenue limit increase.
Mm-hmm.
One is pulling out what should be standalone bills, these special need vouchers and this charter school, independent charter school authority. Those ought to stand alone on their own merits and go through a committee process. And the, what was the last one I had written down? The growth of voucher schools, Senator Olson and Ellis and others have said there ought to be a referendum before a community gets stuck with a voucher school. And I think people should be asking for that before that system grows.
Fred, the key word there was reasonable. And as we all know, that's a slippery slope to define. And I'm very interested in finding ways to help move those legislators along the scale of reasonableness, from ideology to what is best for the children, you know, of the state, and particularly of our district. And that's a fight. That's a fight. I know both of you, and I've participated in some of the education committee meetings last year, a year ago, and know, you know, how things are stacked up against that kind of reasonableness in the numbers. I would like to know what kind of a strategy these personal stories of these districts that not only we, but what I would say the larger community that may not really be aware of what happens behind the curtain can be educated.
Here's a really good example of I think how people can clearly understand what's going on. School districts aren't getting anything. The governor says money's going in to public education, but you see where it's going into, and in the end, you're zeroed out. He's proposed an income tax break of $300 and some million. For the average person, that income tax break equates to $83 a year. A year. A year. That money is probably better well spent in public education. Take the income tax break off the table, because it's not, economically, it's not going to do anything. $83 a year for somebody isn't going to do anything. It's not going to help the economy, I think, like the governor thinks it may. I would suggest to the governor's office and suggest to some of the legislators you'll end up dealing with, take that off the table and plug holes in public education. That's one opportunity. And when the economy really picks up, and hopefully it will soon, and you want to do an income tax break, do it where it's going to actually truly make a difference, rather than, that's one of the, if it's something you agree with as a board or agree with individually, that's one example of how you can explain to somebody, average person's getting $83 a year back in an income tax break, and public education is getting 0 per pupil, and spending increases nothing.
Again, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Sure, thanks.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much. And we'll stay in touch with you, obviously.
Okay, thank you.
Next up on our agenda under reports is open enrollment, and for our open enrollment update, we'll turn to Ms. Scott.
A summary was included in your board packets, but are there any board members that would like a paper copy right now? Let me just walk you through the data that you have in front of you. On the far left-hand side, you will see an overall 5-year summary of open enrollment into our district broken down by grade level. And on the far right-hand upper corner, you will see a 5-year summary, again broken down by grade level of open enrollment of students out of Baraboo. The gray boxes represent looking at the net gain over the last 5 years by district. So, for example, if you see a positive number, that means we have more students coming into Baraboo from that district. Or if you see a negative number, that means we have more students going out to that district. Those districts that have an asterisk by them represent districts that offer a virtual school option. And then the last thing that you have on that is of the students that are open enrolled, the percentage of those attending a virtual school. So you can see in 2008-9 school year, 25% of our open enrolled students out were attending a virtual school. And in 2012-13, that has increased slightly up to 23%. So looking at the overall net gain, we are down just by 3 students when you look at all of the numbers combined. So we had, over the last 5 years, we've had 396 students coming into Baraboo and 399 going out.
Something that you may or may not have seen in a WASB publication, if you want to put this in perspective with state numbers, is 5 years ago there were 28,000 students open enrolled out. The last estimate from DPI was 41,562. So over the course of those years, you can see that number has almost doubled. And a lot, what has to do with it a lot is the open enrollment period going from 3 weeks to 3 months and literally year round with all of the exceptions that parents can apply toward.
Danny, putting on our marketing hat, what kind of communication, what kind of process do we have when somebody wants to either come in or come out to find out reasons for the change?
Sure.
And is there any benefit to that?
Yep, absolutely. Actually, I have personal experience in talking to families that might contact me as the open enrollment coordinator for the district, particularly in highlighting some of the great things, well actually all of the great things that we are doing for our gifted and talented students. That I've specifically had more than one conversation with different families about that, and families really recognizing that we are able to, in often cases, able to provide additional services beyond what other neighboring districts can do for our gifted and talented students. Unfortunately, during the regular open enrollment window, parents do not have to indicate a reason as to why they want to either come into Baraboo or leave. So it's kind of hard for us to dig into that particular data. For the exceptions, however, there's one of 7 possible exceptions that parents have to indicate on that exception application, indicating the reason why they are applying either to come in or to go out. So that does provide us an opportunity to contact that parent, have additional conversations with them about, you know, either additional services or supports that we could provide for their students, for example, if they were opting to apply out. So the exceptions do give us a little more information that we can dig deeper into and utilize that to contact parents.
But the exceptions are small compared to the actual window
Yes,
itself.
Absolutely. As, for example, right now, for this school year, we've had 14 applicants apply under one of the 7 exceptions to come into Baraboo, and we've had 18 apply to attend somewhere else. So in the grand scheme of things, it is a relatively small percentage.
Danny, is there, quite a few of the students is related to the work experience of the parents? Say they're working in Adele, so they go to school?
Sometimes, Gary, yeah, we certainly, I've had that as exceptions. They're either working in Baraboo and it works out, for example, for our 4K students, it's easier for them to have the student attend 4K in Baraboo and then go to one of our daycare facilities within town because this is where they work. So that certainly does apply to some families, but I unfortunately couldn't tell you what percentage.
I know it's several, in fact, about 3 or 4 different
Yep.
families that works
Yep,
that way because.
absolutely.
I mean, it's something that we constantly look at, and if you reviewed the current next steps,
Yep.
you know, it's not enough to just look at the numbers. You do have to, you know, be smart, be strategic, and so we've identified some areas where we can take some action. One of the things that's not necessarily open enrollment, but it does tie into enrollment overall, is our homeschool population. And we did an invite for parents, and Lori is meeting individually with those families to see what their needs are, to talk about what we can offer, and make that a more personal experience for them.
Any other questions?
Danny, on this open enrollment in for 2012-13 is 98, and enrollment out is 105. Is that, how do you arrive at those figures? Is that the third Friday in September when
No,
you're?
actually, all open enrollments either submitted during a regular application window or during an exception, they are all tracked in a DPI database, so I can actually log in at any time. So the numbers that you have before you are current as of within the last 2 weeks.
Anything else? Thank you for the update. Brings us to the portion of the agenda entitled Continuous.
One more question, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I know that you stated that 28% of the open enrolls were attending virtual school. Is that evenly spread across the grade levels, or is that highly concentrated in the upper grade levels? Or is there a concentration at any grade level?
Danny does have a breakdown by grade level. It's much
By
more
district.
detailed, and we did look at it, but you'd be amazed at the number of elementary
Yeah.
students that are open enrolling out to virtual. And I think, Doug, you made the comment, sometimes it's very short-lived, and
Sure.
they end up back in our district, because the blended approach we use with that support in district really makes a difference for a lot of kids. And so it's spread out all over, and it's hard to measure what that number might look like if we offered no online opportunities here for our kids. You know, that's the hard thing to measure.
Yeah, when I initially was looking at the data, Sean, I expected the exact same thing, to see more applications at the upper grade level, but I was surprised that it was across the board.
Okay.
Okay, and maybe just as a follow-up, why don't you just give us like a follow-up sheet as far as what that data is, just so we can just.
It's many sheets.
Many sheets?
Yeah, it's not a one-page summary.
Okay. You can't consolidate it to say K1?
No,
Feel free to send it to Doug.
I have it.
Yeah, right.
Doug will read it.
I have it
Summarize it
broken
for
down by district, by grade, by year. So
Okay.
it's a pretty, it's probably about a 15-tab spreadsheet.
No, I don't. I'll read it, but
But the major takeaways from all that analysis
Are captured on them.
are captured.
Thank you.
Anything else? Hearing none, move on to the item on the agenda entitled Continuous School Improvement. This is the winter benchmark data, and so that we don't get through the evening without this is a PowerPoint.
No.
No, what is it?
You got
Just
the
me.
PowerPoint already.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. You're a powerful person.
I feel so good inside right now.
I'm not sure I do.
Well, that makes me feel better. You all have on your table a packet that has the PowerPoint slides if you so are inclined to look, because it's pretty exciting. Very happy to be here tonight to share at this point in the school year 3 takeaways, which are at the top of our cover sheet there. 1, our overall achievement in both reading and math is up. And that's not specific to just one or a couple of our grade levels, that's really across the board. Also, our student growth is at a pace that is faster than the norming group of the measures of academic progress, which is MAP, which is one of the largest norming groups with any large-scale assessment. So that's pretty exciting as well. And then lastly, we know that we still have areas to grow, and I would say the areas that we need to grow the most are reading and writing, and our staff is very cognizant of that, and that leads us to all the initiatives and work we're doing in those areas right now. So just real quickly, the MAP is used to assess our students 2nd through 8th grade, fall, winter, and spring. It's considered a benchmark assessment for that purpose. And our staff really uses it to measure not only the value our curriculum instruction has for our students, but also the individual student response to that curriculum, and then we can use the data to make adjustments for their everyday instruction. This year, what's significant about the MAP is we made a switch, and we're using the Common Core version of MAP. The reason in doing so is last year we spent so much time identifying our essential learning targets in relation to the Common Core for English, Language Arts, and Math. We wanted to assess that as a direct alignment assessment. So this is a new assessment that MAP has rolled out that has test items that are directly aligned to what our essential learning targets are right now. So I think that initially creates some concern with staff because we recognize that the Common Core is rigorous. And we're not sure how our students would perform, so I'm happy to say that despite that change, we're still seeing the good growth. Another piece that's important for context, and Mr. Gunnell, you feel free to jump in if you see fit. Our 6th graders, you may note that's the one common theme in the data as you look that wasn't quite where we wanted it to be in relation to other grade levels. We did begin assessing our 6th graders a month early in our assessment window, and that was just really due to scheduling conflict with the lab. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, one of the things that we run into with having almost 700 students scheduling it becomes much more difficult, so the window is expanded over a larger period of time, which results in some groups testing very early compared to their peers.
Right. So now we just realized about a month ago we got a correspondence from NWEA, which is the vendor, and they indicated that now the system is web-based. So what that'll allow us to do in the future assessment windows is do more testing in classrooms. So that shouldn't be an issue moving forward. I would say to you, though, that you should expect lower performance at 6th grade because they're assessing 3 weeks prior to the rest of the window of the norming group. Areas of growth or areas to celebrate. The students are performing at higher levels than that NWEA norming group in both reading and math at all grade levels except for 6th and 7th grade reading. Another thing you might note with the 6th graders when you look at both reading and math is you see a huge dip. I shouldn't probably to call it that, but it is. There's a decline in our assessment, and it's right in the fall, and that's not just because of summer slide. I actually had Ellen do some number crunching on that, and we had 25 new students come into the district at that point, and we looked at their specific data, and over half of that 25 is not at benchmark. So that did take us down considerably as a whole group when you average everybody's scores together. And then with 7th grade still just being slightly below the norming group in reading, we are growing at a faster rate, and that's what we need to be doing to eventually get above that norming group. So we're on target to do that by the end of the school year.
Lori,
Yes.
can you create a graph that would show those 25 newer students removed and what the impact
We
of
could.
the
Mhm.
students that have
Mhm.
progressed, so that we can, or add another line,
Mm-hmm. Sure.
simply
Yeah,
to
we could do that.
clarify that, the reality is very different than what this graph looks like.
We can do that for you yet this week. We'll get that out to you. Good suggestion. Although they're all our students at this point.
Yes.
Yeah.
But where they come in,
Right.
and how they impact. I mean, part of what we have said is the longer that we have students, the better they perform, because we're doing the right things. I'm simply identifying that where new students come in is very important in terms of their growth and curve, and we need to be able to distinguish that.
Absolutely, absolutely. You'll note too, as you look at the data, to celebrate the rate of growth for our students is faster than the norming group in both reading and math at all levels, again, except for 6th grade math, and that might be attributable to the earlier assessing. And I think even more exciting is when you compare different cohorts of students at the same grade level. So looking at, for example, where our 2nd graders were with reading compared to this year's 2nd graders, we're at a higher level across the board for all grades and in all content areas. So, if that's a trend we want to be on and we want to continue to see that, that means that last year we didn't have kids at 2nd grade above that norming group. This year we do.
That's
That's so exciting, yeah.
That's the graph you want to see.
Yes.
How
Yep.
are we doing this year compared to how did we do last year?
Yep. So I can do that graph for you too. You can do that.
This is
My
this
to-do
is the
list.
marketing graphs for,
Absolutely.
our sharing of this wonderful news with our community and beyond.
Absolutely. So I mentioned to you, really reading and writing is our continued focus area. And some of the efforts that we're taking to address that is we're working to tightening the ship is kind of the expression we use with our literacy curriculum. We do use the balanced literacy approach, which is not a canned program. And that's intentional because whenever you have a canned curriculum, there's a ceiling to that curriculum. And we want to be able to personalize this learning more for our students. But that also requires a level of complexity and talent that our staff needs to have. And we feel like we need to continue to give our teachers, through the curriculum, more tools, more structures, more strategies. And so our literacy coaches are working to define that for our entire staff and lay out a map that builds that foundation. Part of that process is developing common assessments that mimic or look like our Smarter Balanced assessment that we know is coming up. And that's not to use the cliche teaching to the test. It's really better assessment at a higher rigor. And we've been doing that work most recently over the past month, meeting with grade level teams to talk about what do we really need to ask our students to truly measure that increased rigor of the Common Core. So we've been working on that, which requires students to do a lot more reading and research and then respond with writing. And we can bring some of those examples moving forward. The other thing that I think is a piece of the puzzle is that there's been a shifting role with our district literacy coaches. Historically, reading specialists are used or have been used to pull students who are behind their peers to give them the specific interventions that they need to close the gap. And when they do that, they work with such a small percentage of kids. And we really want our coaches to primarily be in classrooms with teachers, coaching them side by side and having a bigger impact on more students at once. And so we've been balancing with that shifting in roles, and that creates a tension in our buildings because as our coaches work to provide that support, at the same time they're still trying to work with students who really need to close that gap for intervention. So that's a constant conversation in our district, and as we continue to get a stronger curriculum and our interventions are in place and all of our teachers have the capacity to deliver intervention, those coaches will have more opportunity to impact more students as well. Intervention efforts and progress monitoring is occurring with our implementation of multi-tiered systems of support. And I want to, go ahead.
Could you say that in English?
Yes. We're implementing response to intervention, which means when our data shows that our students aren't responding to the curriculum in real time, we're using that data to make adjustments through, smaller group instruction and giving them evidence-based strategies that they need that we know will close the gap. Progress monitoring, we're assessing with Ames Web as a new assessment this year to monitor those students that are receiving intervention to make sure that they have a trajectory line, just like the lines that you're seeing in these graphs, to close that gap for them. The importance of early intervention cannot be understated here. We have an opportunity when we bring 4K students into the district and work with them to give them a strong start and balance, and so it's really important to have a strong curriculum and the right resources for our 4K and also for our kindergartners. It's really those 2 years that are critical, is if students fall behind in those 2 years, it takes longer to fix that issue for them. So we have some research from some pioneers in the world of response intervention that say it takes 7 years to close that gap if they have a bad experience at kindergarten. So we want to prevent that, and that speaks to what we're talking about in terms of a resource allocation and how we group students throughout the district. And then professional development. We're continuing to do professional development for literacy across the content areas, and I don't want to forget about the summer slide because we talk about that a lot here at the board. And summer school program is going to help, but that's not going to be the only answer to summer slide. Most recently, I've been involving myself in reading from a lead researcher about the maximum use of time at the end of the school year and at the beginning of the school year, and how that sandwiches the summer, and how that might be a big piece of our summer slide. So we're starting to have conversations as a staff about, are we teaching up to the last day of the school year? And are we starting with our assessment data at the beginning of the school year to pick up kids where they are and move them versus review? So I think there's probably a number of layers there to address. Yes, Mr. Devon?
Nothing, they may teach right up to the last moment, but that doesn't mean I'm listening till the last moment.
Okay, so.
Field trip,
Yeah, I'm thinking field trip and stuff, yeah.
Some field trips have lots of instructional value.
Good.
So the next steps with this data, and please keep in mind, this is just one point of data. We just got the WKC individual student reports back, so that's another piece. And we also have our own classroom assessments to really guide our instruction. But the staff and our students actually are clamoring for these graphs. So some people do appreciate the PowerPoints. They get behind, the students get behind this data. They're excited about seeing the growth that they're making, and our teachers use that for goal setting. And we also will be disaggregating this data for each building level, and we learn from each other. For example, if Abe is getting more growth at third grade math than GLW and North Freedom and East, they all want to hear what they're doing that maybe isn't occurring in their rooms or in their structures. So that's a way that we can continue to work on our faster rate of growth. All this data guides our professional development planning for next school year as well. And we know that we want to spend more time on the development of common assessments that increase that rigor. And we also want to continue our intervention efforts, and really reading and writing is our main priority. And other than that, I think we already talked about, we're reacting every day with this data to plan for our kids, and that's how we're going to continue to see these results.
Is the norming group national?
Yes.
Is there a way we can change the norming group to be Wisconsin?
That's a really excellent question. At this point, there's no intent in doing that because of the move of Smarter Balanced and PARC consortiums, where all the states are part of those two consortiums to develop the new, federal assessment for each of those consortiums. So
we have no ability to do that ourselves?
No.
They provide us the data for the norming group?
Right. Yeah, absolutely not.
We can't ask for a select in the norming group at all?
I don't believe so, because I don't believe any of my peers have had success in getting that data. And, we collaborate on this data. We can compare our MAP data with other schools that are willing to share with us, but that's why you always see the data in relation to the norming group, because that's the only comparison point that we have with this data at this point.
Do they share out different states versus the norming group?
Mm-mm. Part of that is, this is a purchased assessment. So, there are a few states that use it as their WKC or their state accountability assessment. But the majority of the nation, it's school districts like us who decided to purchase this assessment because we wanted more frequent data and data that wasn't, coming to us at the end of the school year versus in real time.
Lori, I lost track, which class has our initial 4K in it? Is that second or first?
They're in second now.
Second. Have you noticed as far as your graphs here, difference between students that went through 4K and those who didn't?
I think this is just one point of data, so I would want to dig a little deeper in that, and I don't want to make a general statement about that.
I know it's early in the thing.
Yeah.
Thanks for waiting 3 years, so I'm chomping at the bit.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think let me do some more research on that for you because I think that's a great question. What we noticed with our second graders for this particular assessment this time is that they started just a shade below the norm group in fall and now are well above. So we didn't have that same experience last year with our second graders.
Lori, regarding the summer slide and summer school, is there, a way we can develop or an advantage to developing a partnership with the library's summer reading program?
Oh, absolutely.
And whether someone from the library actually came in to the summer school, or whether we, and I guess I'm really thinking of kids that aren't in summer school.
Yeah.
Who still, should be reading during the summer at whatever level they might be at. And whether we can give them points for
like an incentive. Program.
Incentives for when they get back into school in the fall. Because the program is a pretty good program, and it's a fun program, and they make it different every year, and they cover pretty much the whole summer. And so I would think, some opportunity to, to partner with them or to get the kids to know that that's a place they can go in the summertime to get free books and to spend a rainy day or.
We currently do have a partnership with the Baraboo Public Library.
Great.
And we do come in and present to most of our classes, and we do help to support sharing their promotional materials for their summer program.
And that happens in the spring for all kids, so it's not just targeting the summer school kids.
And throughout the school year.
Yeah.
And I think that's good.
Seems like we could do more though at summer school too, to bring them in there just to visit with the classes as summer school is running, and just to remind them that option exists.
That staff is there for that reason. Yeah.
One question on when we start talking about summer school, when is the latest that we're testing with these grades? And are we testing like later in the year and then early in the year too? So like we can really gauge what that summer slide is? So like testing like late May and early September?
Actually, the testing windows that we set up for our district for fall, winter, and spring is in alignment to the norming group testing windows. So we have flexibility as a district to set those windows so that it fits into our school calendar. But we try to target around the same time that the norming group does so that we can do that comparison of apples to apples versus.
So when is those windows?
So we typically, for the spring, we'll start assessing the last week of April into the first couple weeks of May.
And then
So there is, and then in the fall, we start the second week of September.
But we are using another assessment at the elementary level for summer school. And I think this year we have a clear structure for that, for pre and post, so that we can kind of track the progress that students are making.
Yeah, just so we can get a handle on the effects of not only the but also the effects of
Right. We'll use our Ames Web assessment because we can do it every week.
Sure.
Yep.
Super. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
I have one question. I know it's 6th, 7th, and 8th grade reading. I know it's 6th and 7th grade is a little lower than 8th, and 8th is a big jump.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, I think the sixth grade, there's two variables. One, the influx of new students, which will take us down a little bit. And then also we assessed a month early. So if we had another month of instruction, that may have been very different. But that's something we'll continue to monitor with all our other assessments. And then with 7th grade reading, if you look at where they were last year as a starting point on your graph, they've really made tremendous growth in a year and a half's worth of time. And if they stay on their trajectory, they will close the gap by the end of the school year, especially with that rate of growth that they have. That's almost double of what the norming group is. So I think that's something we definitely want to keep watching. Ed.
And in terms of timing that testing window too, now that will be cloud-based, that will enable us to use different devices in order to test kids, which will shorten that window for us.
Yeah.
So we won't have kids who are testing a month before that window actually closes.
Besides the new kids and the testing, date of the testing,
Mhm.
those kids are undergoing a fair amount of stress. moving
Transition.
From elementary
Mhm.
to middle school. Different, not only different location, but different methodology, different structure, daily structure. You know, I imagine that we're always gonna see some dip there, I would think.
Mhm. And, you know, one of the things that we talked about earlier today too is looking at our teaching staff at those grade levels. There are a lot of newer teachers to the profession as well, and we do know from research that also has an impact overall on student achievement because they're developing their mastery as a teacher.
You know, another factor that could play into that is, as a school, we have a much better sense of that 7th grader or 8th grader, so we can be more purposeful in our grouping of kids.
You bet.
Whereas with incoming 5th graders, or from 5th grade to 6th grade, we may not have a feel for those kids yet and how to strategically group them.
Well, those kids don't have a feel for each other that they, in 6th grade that they have in 7th and 8th grade. They're coming in from 5 different schools, and it's a very new place for them.
This is very exciting data, you guys.
It's
We're
exciting
doing a great
data,
job.
but
Yeah.
our newspaper reporter left right before you started. So, Lori, if you
I didn't
wouldn't
even
mind
notice.
Sending him the PowerPoint, and then
yes.
he could follow back up.
Yes, he has a packet, but I'll send him the electronic
All right.
copy, yes.
Can we, the thing says no exit, can we put like?
This
No
means you.
exit, Tim.
All right, thank you.
Brings us to the portion of the agenda entitled Personnel Recommendations. We have first up the approval of a couple of retirements. First up is from the high school Spanish position, that resignation of Norma Schilling. Entertain a motion to that effect.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And also the second resignation, retirement, would be for Pat Stelzer, which is the middle school math position.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mearing, seconded by Cummings. Any discussion? We were talking in the interim here as to how long each of those teachers has been within the district, and we're gonna find out for sure how long. and
Norma
make sure that-
Schilling, 32 years.
32 years.
Pat Stelzer, 21 years.
So I would like to publicly acknowledge Norma for her 32 years of service to the Baraboo School District and Pat for 21 years. So having a motion and a second on the retirement of Mr. Stelzer, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. No resignations, new hires. Brings us to postings, which would be for the two positions we just accepted the retirements of.
Move to
That would be
approve
high
both
school
postings.
Spanish and high school math. Having a motion. Is there a second? Motion by McNevin, seconded by Cummings. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of those two postings signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. I have two names to add for the long-term substitute positions. The first name for the BELC 4K position is Maggie Boucher. And the name associated with the West Kindergarten position is Emily Alexander. Maggie Boucher for the 4K, Emily Alexander for West. I'd entertain a motion for those approval of long-term substitutions.
Move to approve.
I'm taking one at a time.
BELC 4K position.
Move to approve.
Second.
We having a motion and a second. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Brings us to the West Kindergarten position, Emily Alexander.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Brings us to the portion of the agenda entitled consent. For that, I turn to the Chair of Finance, Mr. McNevin.
Finance Committee met and recommends the approval of the receipts and disbursements and donations. And for those of you interested, the disbursements were $1,361,057.68.
Second.
Not a penny more. not a penny left.
Having a motion and a second for the approval of the January receipts and disbursements. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Brings us to the portion of the agenda entitled New Business. First is the approval of the revised 2013-2014 school calendar. You were given a quick background as to why it was revised. Entertain a motion for that revised calendar.
I move to approve.
Second. Motion by Mearing, second by Vedro. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Brings us to new business, Johnson Block and Company audit discussion. Mr. McNevin, are you going to take that lead?
Yeah, Finance Committee met with the auditors for the first time in a couple of years. We haven't had them here in probably 5 years. And so they came up to discuss the position of our audit. We have a clean bill of health as far as the audit report goes. We received I'm thinking of the term for the letter. Well, the name of the audit, it's a
Johnson, unqualified.
unqualified opinion. Thank you. I was gonna say it's a qualified opinion,
No.
but that's a bad thing. It's an unqualified opinion, meaning they agree with Martha's numbers. So, it was a good discussion. We've got some housekeeping duties that we're gonna clean up for next year, and we're good to go. So we move to accept the audit report.
Second.
Having a motion and a second. Any discussion?
And you all should have received a hard copy in your mailbox.
Hearing none, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Brings us to C, which is the class action litigation against a WEA trust. There was background provided in your board packet. Essentially, if the board wishes for the district to remain, we need to take no action tonight. The only action required is if we wish to opt out. I do have a question, and I don't know if you have the answer to it. How many districts are involved in the suit?
I do not know. I believe there were approximately 16, I don't know if it was initially or at the time we received the documentation, but there may be districts that have been added, so the short answer is I don't know.
I have a question as well, and that is, in the best case scenario, the award could actually be higher than the amount of 114. Why is that?
I don't know the precise damages that the court can award in this case, but if, for example, the court awards 100% of what we're asking for, plus attorney's fees, I don't know if there's any, then it would be 115, give or take. I don't know if there's any interest that could be awarded, for example, since they've withheld the money arguably from us for 2 years. And again, I don't know if there's any punitive award possibility either.
Great, thanks.
Kevin, you're correct that the board does not have to take formal action. However, you know, because of the nature of this litigation, if you choose to, I mean, you could as well. It's not necessary. It's up to the board.
Well, we can, so you're saying we could take action to do nothing?
If we take no action, we continue on with the class action.
Well, I understood that part.
Yeah, I mean, you could make a formal motion to support the litigation. It's not required, but you could do it if you want to make a statement from the board. I guess that's what I was getting at.
Hearing no motion, let's move on to the next item, which is public depositories discussion. Again, I'll turn to Mr. McNevin.
The Finance Committee had a special meeting, given the headlines, of course, the headline writer's gone, but given the headlines of a local institution receiving a consent decree from the Office of Comptroller of Currency, Martha and Crystal and Gail scrambled like mad for 3 days to assemble the information, easy to understand graph of where we deposit our funds, how our funds flow, the limits of our exposures. Essentially what we learned is that all of our deposits are safe, all of our deposits are covered or cross-collateralized with the institutions that we deposited. There are safeguards for our dollars, some of them being the FDIC limits that you all know about. And there's different classes that the FDIC insurance covers. We learned a lot more about FDIC insurance that we care to know. There's a state pool that covers a certain amount, but we learned about the liquidity of those funds. And then there's the collateralization that the banks provide. And they've all stepped up. And we're fully collateralized at all of ours. But we're taking a look at our policies, our procedures. In doing so, we're going to be coming forth with some, in the short term, everything's good to go. And medium term and long term, we're going to come back and maybe clean up some of our policies and have different ways of handling things. But financial security always comes first. And that's what we wanted to sit down and talk about. And I'm happy to report that everything's good to go.
Any questions? Thank you for the update. Brings us to E, which is a discussion that came out of the most recent Buildings, Grounds, and Transportation Committee meeting. Gary?
Everybody should have gotten a paper in their mailbox there on the pad here, showing the different temperatures at different schools and health clubs around the area. Through BG&T, we decided, or thought we would come forward with a trial temperature schedule here, covering some of the events scheduled. That would take us up to the end of energy audit time, which at that time we could make more of an informed decision as far as permanent pool temperatures. Any questions, or Martha, would you care to add to that?
I don't have anything to add.
I would just like to make sure that a copy of this with a response letter goes to the women, the individuals who raised the question, so that they know we have received their concerns, we have assessed and evaluated, and we want to give them back the information.
It was discussed at BG&T to also post it at the pool, if I remember correctly.
I have some questions though, for it, and regarding the temperatures and the times. You know, some of this might be open to interpretation. When we say WI competition dual meets, does that mean that the whole WI schedule is then covered by that? I mean, so basically the WI schedule is basically from the beginning of September till about the middle of February. So that would cover that whole
What we're doing right now is
schedule.
we're finishing off the rest of the year in a trial on this 2 or 3 week trial that we have finished out the year right now.
So we're just gonna have a 2-week trial, and then at
We're
that
going
time?
on, and then we got our energy audit coming in and working on this, and we'll take that into consideration at the same time. But when it really gets down to it, there's not much change of the way it was or the way it is right now, other than the temperature raising for the tots and stuff.
Okay.
And the scheduling will take care of, Heather said that she was going to try to work in the scheduling into that, so
Sure.
that was in a period between meets where we would have to fluctuate and take more energy. Another thing I believe is the energy part of it on all the heat and stuff, that included, and if I understand correctly, included the water for the showers and stuff, so that's it, that's all the, it's not just the pool, but it's
Well,
showers.
okay, so I mean, obviously, this is just a temporary thing at this point, and obviously, there's gonna be other things that we're gonna consider as far as the energy of not only our usages, but the usages of other pools and things that we can do to save energy, and then also not to exceed the energy we use when we have these times where the temperature comes up. Because no matter what temperature you pick in a swimming pool, somebody isn't gonna be happy.
Apparently, the good time to swim is when the tots are around. Maybe we should, it's warmer then.
For some people, but for some it isn't.
Maybe we should have a rent-a-tot program or something.
For point of clarification, because part of the recommendation does supersede a policy, I would entertain a motion that we proceed with the recommendations for the remainder of the school year, and that we revisit the issue at the end of the school year. I'm not sure what time frame our energy audit can come into the mix.
The temperature of the pool supersedes a board policy somehow?
Yes, because the temperature is set in a board policy to not exceed 84.
Energy guideline policy.
So the 86 degrees for the tots is we need to suspend that policy temporarily while we complete this process,
That portion of the
that
policy.
portion of the policy, so that we're not in violation.
So I will make a motion to accept the BGT's recommendation for this trial period here.
I'll second that. Sounds excellent.
Which would suspend the board policy.
Just that portion that
Just
talks
that
about
one
the
line.
86.
It's only one line.
Yeah.
For this period,
Correct.
temporary.
Till the end of the school year.
Yes, not a permanent. I'm fine.
Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Brings us to the portion of the agenda entitled Executive Closed Session.
I move that we go into closed session.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
I'll make a motion to offer the middle school AP position to Dave Schwartz.
I will second that.
Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion for the Jack Young Middle School Associate Principal position to Dave Schwartz signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
I want to,